Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of DABCC Live. I'm really excited as we have PHD Virtual back on the line with us. We've been doing a few webinars with these guys. I hope you guys have been able to attend some of the ones in the past. If not, definitely jump on over to dabcc.com and you can download those guys on demand. Really good webinars, really great technology, and great presenters. So today we have Ian Jones, who is a senior systems engineer, a job I once did, with their DR products. And he's going to talk about reliable disaster recovery and in their solution Site Recovery, or with Site Recovery Manager and in their solution. So with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ian. But before I do that, I mentioned this a little bit in the intro, but if you guys just joined, please feel free to ask questions. Use the questions piece to go to webinar. Also, if you have any hiccups, if there's audio difficulties, anything, shoot me something within that questions. My job is to sit here and monitor these questions and sort of interrupt Ian throughout the webinar to make sure that we get these things asked within context. And then, of course, when we're all said and done, we'll stick around until the very end, until we're done with every single one of your questions. And like I said earlier, that's really the best part about this webinar, is it's your opportunity to get to these experts. So on that note, Ian, I'm excited. How are you going to woo us? It's your show.
Right. Thanks a lot, Doug. Just a little bit of an introduction about myself just before we start. Obviously, as Doug said, my name's Ian Jones. I'm Senior Systems Engineer for DR Products over at PHD Virtual. Now, I actually came from an acquisition. So PHD bought the company that I used to work for called Virtual Sharp. So if you've come across that product, that company, ReliableDR was our product, and that's the product that we have here. So it's a product that is continually being developed, and PHD's got some great plans and some great ideas of how to move the product forward. So, just to go on, I've got a few slides that I'm going to go through fairly quickly, and now I want to get on to an actual demonstration of the product. But we'll go through a lot of who PHD Virtual is, what ReliableDR is, and how it goes up against things like SRM. So VMware Site Recovery Manager is, a lot of people think of it as a competitor to us. It can be a competitor. We can also work alongside it. So we have a lot of advantages over that product, but we'll go through all those as we move further on. So who is PHD Virtual? Well, we're a company based out of the US. We've had 13 consecutive quarters of record growth now. So we've got a couple of products. We have ReliableDR, and we also have what we call Virtual Backup. The Virtual Backup product is not something I'm going to be touching on here, but it's something that has been covered in other webinars. But it's all about being able to back up your virtual machines, whether they be VMware or Zen Server, so Citrix. Now, what makes PHD Virtual unique? Well, it's about the ease of use of the products, really. It's very easy to download the product, whether it's the backup or the ReliableDR, and install it and actually get it running in your environment. Just to give you an idea, if I myself do a full proof of concept with a customer, I can usually install it, train them, and test the product in around about 2 hours. So that's full install, full configuration inside their environment, pick some sample virtual machines, do some application configurations, these sorts of things on it, all stuff that we'll talk about later on, and prove that it works. So it's very easy to do. Now, one of the things that we talk about here is, why is business continuity threatened? Well, the problem with business continuity is it's very hard to test it, to actually move it forwards, to keep it all running, but to actually prove that things work. So everybody can go, yeah, we have a DR site, we do DR tests. But those tests really are only any good at the time that you run them, because configurations change. I mean, as the slide says, configurations evolve rapidly, so easily hundreds of changes per week. New applications, whole hosts of things. So when people do DR tests, the big problems that they have is how much it costs, The fact that they're very disruptive, because normally you've got to take people out of their normal working environment, you've got to split networks, you've got to do a whole host of separate work. Now, this may be out of hours. You may have to have downtime on systems to reconfigure them. There's an awful lot of work to be done, and it's very manpower intensive. And that's one of the key things. Because it is manpower intensive, you end up with the sort of sticky finger problems, where people will type the wrong thing or they might select the wrong item, and you don't get the same tests, or you get mistakes made, which can cause a lot of time and a lot of cost. So just to give you an example, there's some service outages coming up on the screen. So these are just some of the ones that have been reported in the news. But these are basically very large organizations that may have things like high availability data centers, a whole host of different things, but they still have problems because there's lots of different reasons that your services could be interrupted. Now, these can range from a huge amount of different things, from things like hardware failure, so power, cooling, weather issues, so natural disasters, security breaches, software errors, so patching errors, and as I said, even things like human errors. So even if it's not a DR test, if you're trying to reconfigure a server, install a new application, change a setting on a box and you reboot it by mistake, or you even, God forbid, manage to half destroy the machine itself, so whether you remove critical files on it, there's a whole host of reasons that you can have service disruptions. And one of the ones before was for HSBC, which was a very large bank over here in Europe. And what they did was they applied a software patch to their production systems, which took out the banking network for about 7 or 8 hours. So people couldn't process payments, a whole host of things. So that was a huge disruption for them. Now, ReliableDR is designed to help get around a lot of these problems. And that's the sort of stuff we're going to talk about. Now, you may well have come across a product called SRM, Site Recovery Manager, which is from VMware. And as I said earlier, that is one of our competitors or people that we work with, because as I said, we can work on both sides. Now, the problem with SRM is it's exactly as it says on the box. It's Site Recovery Manager. I mean, it can do pools of machines, but basically it's designed to bring boxes up and just turn them on, and that's it. So actually, Site Recovery Manager covers those sort of the hardware sections and the natural disasters. It doesn't cover things like security breaches, software errors, and even human errors. Because when you're using SRM, you're not continuously testing. You usually use that as a manual testing system every month or every quarter, or you could use it every week if you wanted. But it's not seamless. It doesn't just run in the background. And these are all things that ReliableDR is made to do. So when you look at sort of DR recovery, testing, backup, whatever you want to think of it as, this is really the stack. So when you want to protect your data, you've got backup and recovery options. You've got replication options, and there's lots of those. You've then got the DR testing that you're going to do. So that's your yearly DR test. That is that manual test. But then you've also got a service on top of that, DR assurance, and these are the areas that ReliableDR sits under. So SRM really only sits in the DR testing section. It doesn't back up your data, and it doesn't do replication. Well, it does do replication, but not of your data. It will do replication of your virtual machines. And obviously, if the data is sat on the VM, then yes, it will replicate that. But if it's off on a NAS or something else, then it's not really designed to do that. But with PHD, we've got this whole stack covered. So we have our virtual backup, which is scalable. It's very efficient. So this puts on a backup appliance on your production site. and then you could back up all of your machines to that. That can then replicate your machines to a DR site, or even off to the cloud using the Cloud Hook element. So it provides you recovery in your instant rollback. What it doesn't do is it doesn't do your DR testing, and it doesn't do your DR assurance. But that's where ReliableDR sits. So we've got that whole stack covered with the two products. Now, ReliableDR, so I've mentioned this quite a few times. It's a product designed for very simple environments, right up to complex multi-tier applications. So when I say that, we could be looking at an environment that is 1 or 2 virtual machines in size. We could be looking at an environment that's 70, 80, 150. Doesn't really matter. ReliableDR is what we call an orchestration engine. So it's designed to say, I want to test my CRM system. So you'll group those 3, 4, 30, 40, whatever it is, VMs into one job, and we'll test that. And then you might have another job for your Exchange. You might then have another one for your whole infrastructure. We'll talk about how all the testing's done and look at how these are all grouped when we look at the application itself. But it's designed with a full web interface so that you can see things like RTO and RPO. So recovery time objectives and recovery point objectives. So if your business needs to set service level agreements to say, well, I can get my CRM system back up in 20 minutes, you know with the testing that ReliableDR does that you can very easily fail it over and do the recovery on it within that time frame. And you can test as often as you like. So, as I said, it's got a complete dashboard there. It's fully automated. So you test hourly, you can test daily, you can test weekly. You can use it for testing, you can use it for failovers, but more importantly, failbacks. And this is all done at the push of a button. So it's not an automated system. You have to make the decision that you want to fail it over, and that is deliberate. Because talking to a lot of people, they don't particularly trust or fully automated systems, especially when you're going to be failing over things like Exchange or even your whole infrastructure. There needs to be that last final person that says, yes, we want to do this, we're sure. But ReliableDR also is agentless and it's non-disruptive at your production site. And for a lot of people, that is real key. So the product can be used in an enterprise environment. It can also be used for cloud service providers, MSPs, people that want to do things like DR as a service. And this is because the environment as well is fully multi-tenanted. So each customer on that platform can have their own configuration. Now, I talked about testing applications. So being application aware. So what happens is, when we create the snapshots of the virtual machines at the DR site, we'll put them into an isolated network and we'll turn everything on and we'll test them. Now, the application testing can be something as simple as, same as SRM does, should we say, which is brings the machine up and just checks that VMware Tools responds. So that's a very basic test. Now, with SRM, yes, you can then extend that. You can put on custom scripts to do some other testing. Our tests are built in, so they're out-of-the-box tests. You can also add your own ones on and you can extend it very, very easily. But we've got things like out-of-the-box tests for Exchange, for SQL. So just to take SQL as an example, if you've started a SQL server, you're going to need to check that the SQL services are working. Well, that's a tick box. You then might want to actually query the SQL database itself, make sure it's responding with the correct information. Because I've seen things like SQL databases start, but then not actually be working properly, especially in things like a DR situation. So that's all built in. Now, the product itself is very flexible, so it can support Microsoft and Linux x86 applications. As I said, scalable from small IT infrastructures, so 5, 10 virtual machines, all the way up to hundreds of virtual machines. But we can also do different types of replication, and you can mix and match these. So you can use SAN-based replication, so NetApp, EMC, IBM, HP, etc. Or if you haven't got a SAN-to-SAN capability, maybe you're a cloud service provider. So your customer has got a HP, and you've got NetApp. Well, they're not going to talk to each other. We have what we call host-based replication. So it's our own inbuilt software-based replication. We'll take a snapshot of a VM, copy it to the DR site, and then use VMware's best practice of change block tracking to bring the information over. So to bring over the differences after that. And we have things like offline seeding and things to help make that process simpler. So just to put a little bit of graphics around what I've just been talking about. So on the primary site, you group your applications or your virtual machines, whatever you want to think of it as. So you might say, I'll have one job called my CRM system, another one for SharePoint, another one for Exchange, another one for ERP. We then replicate those on whatever format you use. So if it's hardware-based, we'll use that. If you haven't got that, as I say, we can use our own software-based replication, so what we call host-based replication. Take the snapshots and move everything over to the DR site. You install ReliableDR in the DR site, of course, because if you install it in the production site, you lose that site, you've lost the server. Now, you can make backups of it to other sites, but that is the only thing you need to install. So you just install the ReliableDR box, and that's it. So there's no agents. You might be thinking, well, how do you get the configuration out of the primary site? Well, we hook into VMware's API, so their VIX API, and we pull the information out that way. And if we need to get up into the virtual machine to do things like the application testing, change IP addresses of machines, because when you're at the secondary site, you might need to change the IP address, or even just change the default gateway to get things to work properly. We do all that up through the VMware tools. So we do all of the testing and everything inside the sandbox at the secondary site. But then, as I say, when you want to fail over, we will fail over to that either whatever's at the secondary site, so same as SRM will do. The problem with that is if the reason you're failing over is because, let's just say it's a web server or even a database and it's been corrupted. So you think, oh yeah, well, I'll fail over to my DR site, bring the machine up there so I'm back up and running very quickly. Well, if that failure is replicated to the second site, then you're going to be bringing up the same problem. So when we run these tests, we create what is called a CRP, a Certified Recovery Point. And that is a known good point in time. So when you fail over, you can either fail over to whatever's there, or you can fail over to these recovery points. That gives you the ability to step back per application, or in fact per virtual machine, because one of the beauties about ReliableDR is even though we've tested the whole CRM system, we don't have to fail everything. You can just pick a single server, single VMware server out of there and actually fail it over. So it becomes very, very granular. So just to give you a quick sneak preview of ReliableDR, this is the main dashboard. So when you log in, it's all web-based. It's got complete role-based administration on it. So depending on what account you log in, depends on whether you could do anything, whether you see anything. So you can give somebody view access, say maybe an auditor, view access to all the reporting, but they can't get to any of the configuration. And as I said, this is multi-tenanted. There's a little item on here called organizations, and that allows you to have multiple configurations for different customers. So everything that you can do in one level, you can then do in multiple levels. So this is what we call the Compliancy Report. It's the main screen that you log into. It shows you basically where you are, so where your application testing is. So it'll tell you the RTO, so the recovery time objective. It'll tell you the recovery time actual, so how long it took last time you ran the test. So in the example here, the project logging, it was 20 minutes. But actually, when it ran, it took 28 minutes. So it's put a warning in here for that. But what it can also do is then send you out an alert. So an email or an SNMP alert. So you have a job that runs over time. Maybe it's had a problem copying a VM. Maybe a service has failed that you're not testing as you start it, so it's delayed everything. Or maybe you've just added more machines in and you haven't realized. And actually, it's going to take longer than the business has said. So this just gives you the heads up and all the warnings. Now, each job, so all these different jobs, can have different reporting. So project logging could be sending emails to somebody. Finance could be sending an SNMP alert and an email alert off to somebody completely different, etc. So you've got your recovery point objective as well, so how old your last test is. And your recovery point actual. So when how long ago your last test ran. And then obviously date and time of your last test. So this actually can all be exported as well. So if you didn't want to give anybody the ability to log in, or maybe it's an IT manager and they just went, I just want to know what state we're at, you can export this as a PDF. You can export it as Excel. You can even set it to email those reports automatically. So it'll just go off to, say, the IT manager every Monday morning with the state of play report, which is basically this screen. As I say, you can have all your different services down the side. You can organize them in different folders, so that might be departments, different tenants. It's up to you. And you've got your real-time view of your recovery awareness. So this is constantly updated. So as a new job runs, these all update. So besides just doing DR tests, there's a few other use cases for the product. So to be able to guarantee and accelerate the recoverability of all IT services, because you're constantly doing this, or the system is constantly doing it for you, you know when you've had some configuration drift, or if you've got a problem, something that is going to break that virtual machines or that application from starting. But also, because it's completely automated, you can just right-click Failover and select a couple of options, and that's it. It will fail over very, very easily. So getting things back is very quick and simple. Now, obviously, once you've failed over, you can also fail back. Because that is one thing that a lot of people worry about, is getting their data back to the production site, and it supports all that. And the fail back works in different ways depending on your replication as well. But we've talked about being able to automate exercises and compliance reporting. So because these reports are kept and they're stored, it means when you have the auditors come in and say, okay, what's the state of DR? How are you testing your virtual machines? You can just pull them up a report and go, this is the machines that we're using in this test. These are the application tests, and here's when we've run it, like every day for the last year or every week for the last year. It just makes life so much simpler. We have a lot of people that use it as DR as a service. A lot of cloud service providers, MSPs, etc. Now, one of the hidden benefits of the product is because we can take a snapshot of a virtual environment, and it was actually one of our customers that came to us with this. That sandbox, that isolated network, you can fail over or a copy of every machine into there and bring it up if you wanted to. So that's doing a full DR test. But then you could leave it there. And The reason you might want to leave it there is so that you could log into that environment and do application testing, do updates, patch testing, dev work, basically. And if you need to regenerate that environment because you broke something or you want to retest a patch, shut it down and restart it, and it starts up with a fresh, clean build. But that build is as good as your production environment because it is a snapshot of your virtualized production environment. It's very quick and easy. And that obviously includes all the patch testing side. So, Doug, just before I move on, and we start looking at the key differences between SRM and ReliableDR, has any questions come up?
We do have.
Everybody gone to sleep?
No, I don't think everyone's gone to sleep. I definitely haven't, so I hope nobody else has. I will say we are actually having a little bit of difficulties, unfortunately, with people logging in. I've been receiving some emails, so if anybody out there is maybe dialed in.
So I'll go through some of the key differences.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ian. I was talking and I was on mute, and all of a sudden, once you talked, it reminded me. Yeah, I'm probably on mute. So
yes, I just got a message that said not asleep from somebody. So
yeah, but Doug's asleeping over there. No, Doug's not sleeping. So we do not asleep. Yes. So I'm not asleep. I'm very much enjoying this. So what can I say? We do have a couple questions from the audience, and please, guys, use the questions piece of GoToWebinar to ask your questions. As you can tell, Ian knows his business, so definitely use that. I do have a couple questions. Let me go through them real quick with you. First of all, how is it licensed?
Okay, it's licensed per virtual machine that you want to protect, and that can be quite important in a production environment because in your production environment, you might have, let's just say, 100 virtual machines. But when you look at it, you say, well, yeah, 30 of those are development machines, 10 are sort of spares and duplicates. We've really got about, let's just say, 40 that you want to protect. So that's all you have to license for. You don't have to license the other 60.
Cool. Very cool. Next question is, are there, what hypervisors do you support?
Okay, so at the moment, we only support VMware. So it needs to be any licensed version of the VMware ESX. And that's because of how we interact with the VIX API, the programming interface. But it can be any version from version 4 upwards. And actually, you can have mixes. So you might have 4 in production and 5 in DR, or the other way around. There's only really one proviso, and that's the hardware level of the virtual machines has to be able to run across the 2 hypervisors. So it needs to be the lowest denominator that will run on the infrastructure. Now, going forwards, we are looking at adding Hyper-V support. We're looking at towards the end of this year. And then beyond that, possibly Zen Server. It depends what the flavor of the time is as we go into next year. I mean, in the IT industry, we all know sort of 6, 8 months, 12 months, it can all change. It might be somebody completely new, completely different by then. But yes, we are looking at adding Hyper-V as well to the product line.
Perfect. I'm actually learning Hyper-V as we speak. I know it a little bit, but I'm diving into it a little bit deeper. So not as we speak.
We're getting a lot more. We're getting a lot more interest on Hyper-V since sort of 2012. People are starting to really look at it. Haven't seen that many in production. I know a few people that are running it. But yeah, it's just getting better and better all the time. So it's actually starting to give VMware a bit of a run for its money now.
You bet. And for me, there's a couple applications I require or that I need that require Hyper-V, and that's the reason I've been using it. So yeah. Okay, that's the questions I have right now. Well, there's one gentleman that says it looks excellent. I'd be interested in seeing it in action. And then, do you use this in production in your company? I personally don't, because I don't need that in what I do. I'm pretty much one guy, in a computer in a webinar. But these guys are going to show it off, and I imagine they use it, being that they're the creators of it.
Yeah.
So, Ian, before I do that, please, guys, use the questions piece to ask more questions, and we'll get to them in a little bit. Ian, I'll give you back the floor.
Okay, lovely. So I'm just going to go through some of the key differences between ourselves and SRM, because a lot of people say your biggest competitor must be SRM. Well, it is probably one of our largest competitors. But then again, we actually work with SRM. So to give you an example, AXA Wealth in the UK, one of our larger customers, they were an SRM customer. And we've got a few people like this. So they've got SRM in place, and it's doing its copies, it's designed to fail over the whole site. They needed to go that bit further. They've got compliancy issues. They need to do more granular DR tests, and SRM just won't allow them to do that. So actually, they added us on the back end. So they've got SRM and then ReliableDR just to do the testing. So we can work in conjunction with them, but what they then found was when they tried ReliableDR's own inbuilt replication, it was as good as SRM's because it's based on the same technology. But they were also using storage arrays. So they were doing array-based replication, and we can interact with that. So they actually got rid of SRM in the end because there was no point paying the maintenance on it, and just switched over to using ReliableDR. We've had a few people like that where it's been the sort of renew costs and the maintenance costs that's driven them away from the product. Plus, they need the more granular thing. So, some of these key differentiators will show you, or at least tell you, a bit of the differences, and then we'll move on to looking at the actual product. So, the first one, applications. As I said, we basically look at the applications. So you build something that says, say, CRM system, and you test that application. So you know if you need to fail over that machine, or that set of machines, they're going to work. We can give you real-time objectives on the applications. So your recovery time objectives. So because we're constantly doing those tests, we know how long it's going to take. You've got your RPOs on the applications. So your recovery points, because you know the last time you tested it. It's a day ago, it's a week ago, as opposed to 6 months or 12 months ago. But it's 100% automated. So the whole idea is you set this up and you fire and forget it. You just leave it running in the background. If it has a problem, it tells you. Sends you a notification and lets you know a job's failed, it's gone out of time, whatever it is. You've got your real-time web-based dashboard that has complete role-based administration. You've got your out-of-the-box testing scripts. So being able to test those Exchange, the web servers, etc. Now, we cater for what they call here non-logical disasters. So a non-logical disaster is something like a patch that goes wrong, or a failure of a piece of hardware, these sorts of things. So something that is unexpected as opposed to a natural disaster, so a weather issue or flooding, something like this. Now, you can use ReliableDR as well to migrate from one data center to another. So there's an option there to say failover. And all it'll do is it'll shut down one data center, move it all across, bring it all up at your DR site, or even per application. But of course, because you're testing all the time, it's guaranteed recovery because you know they're going to come back up. Because you're testing them, you're re-IPing, you're running your application tests. You're doing everything you can possibly do to guarantee it. But you can have hybrid services. So if you've got Windows boxes, you've got Linux boxes, at a push, you can even integrate physical servers. So you can do things like a P2V, or break out of that isolated environment to high availability physical boxes. But for some people, a real key one is the zero footprint at the production site. So we don't put any agents out there. We don't put any extra appliances out there. As long as you're doing the inbuilt replication that's there at the moment or the array-based replication. So as long as you're running with all of our standard stuff as we stand in the current versions. And as I said earlier, we support mixed ESX versions. So you could have version 4 and version 5, or 5 and 4. Doesn't make any difference. Plus storage array support. Now, some people will say VMware SRM does support storage arrays. It does. The key difference is the storage adapters that are used are written by us. They're written by PHD in-house. And we connect, like we do with the VIX interface, we connect to the storage's API. So whether that's via a command line interface, SSH, whatever it may be. So using the standard connection. The beauty about that is then, if there's an issue, we hold it all. We don't go, oh, it's a storage adapter, we need to go off and talk to NetApp or whoever it is. We'll fix it there and then. So it's very, very simple because we own the whole process end to end. So I'm not going to go through these case studies actually, but I mean this is a very large insurance company. They were having exactly as we've talked about. SRM was proving difficult to set up and manage and run, so they actually switched to us. And Santa Lucia Insurance, that's another one. They were just having great difficulties about doing DR testing and scaling and everything else. So being able to break things down into individual applications, plus being able to do it automated was very, very simple. Now, I've talked about a lot of these. So we've got a total solution. So you can do the heartbeat check all the way up to full application testing. We've got granular approach for applications, easy to install, completely automated, and it has its own unique multi-tenanted dashboard. And a very low cost of ownership, because once you've got it in, that's effectively it. It's up and running. What I'm just going to do now, I'm going to switch over to my demo environment. So Doug, could you just confirm for me that you can see the web browser, please?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, lovely, thanks. I just want to make sure, because sometimes I've seen with, you know what webinars are like, occasionally you switch applications and things don't refresh.
Yes, we're actually having
talking about something.
You bet. And GoToWebinar is actually having troubles today. I received about 10 emails so far from people that are actually even having troubles logging in. So if you guys are, it's really upsetting to me, and it's beyond our control, unfortunately, because it's the GoToWebinar service that we use. So if you guys have any troubles, let us know. Use the questions piece, let us know. We can slow down, speed up. We are recording this, so we will give you a nice copy to take on. And then after the fact, you know, if you guys have questions, you can always contact PHD, and they'll get you answers. So yeah, it's sort of a bummer there, but life on the internet, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this is ReliableDR. So you log in, username and password. The username and password can be Active Directory integrated, or they can be local accounts. So it's up to you. And if you are going down the multi-tenanted route, so having multiple companies on the same infrastructure, each organization can link to a different Active Directory as well. So all the security is completely segregated. Now, this product was built from the ground up, or this version of the product, should I say, was built from the ground up for cloud service providers. So it was designed as a complete multi-tenanted platform. So this is that compliance report that we saw earlier. So I'm not going to go into this. So as you can see, the RTO, the RPOs, etc. We're going to have a quick look through some of the auditing and the reporting side, and then we'll look at actually doing a failover and a failback. So showing things like the application tests, and just show how easy it is to do that. And I've done a lot of talking about the tests and the ease of failover. Now, I've just switched over to the job sessions window here. So this is telling me everything that's happened regards jobs. So whether they're successful or not, who ran them, when they ran, dates, times, etc. So as you can see here, these top two were run by admin, and that's me. So it's identified that I ran a failover and a discard earlier on today. And these are all UK times, by the way, so you're not going crazy with the times on here. I'm obviously, if you haven't guessed, I'm based in the UK. But what we can do here is you can start to have a look at all these and then actually drill down. So if I take this test for the web servers and I do view details, what it will do is it will go into the logs and it will show me everything that it ran through. So all the lists of all the tests, everything that it did. Oops, that's per usual. Joys of a live demonstration. There we go. So it shows you everything. So this is what we call a host-based replication job. So this is where we will actually do the copy. And as you can see here, Web Server 10, which is a Linux box, there was no data to copy. But Web Server 11, which is actually a Windows box, there was a small amount of data to copy over. So as part of running the test, it refreshed from the vCenter, copied the data to get their up-to-date settings, powers on the VMs, and then ran my application test. And then powered off and reset all the snapshots. So that was one job using the host-based replication. If I choose effectively the same job, but using array-based, it's slightly different, obviously, because we have to invoke the storage arrays. So this just breaks down all of that data for you. It's very easy to say to an auditor, well, Web 01 and Web 02, these are the application tests that we run, they all worked, and that was it. So you can very simply give that to them. Now, another piece of the auditing is what we call tasks and events. This is more about the users than the applications. So when somebody's logged in, when they've ran a test, these sorts of things. So if you look here, those two tests that I ran earlier. So I have my login, and then the fact that I executed my failover to CRP, and then my discard, date, time, etc. So this is all about the user. Now, as I said, you can schedule the reports, send them to Excel, send them to PDF, etc. So if I have a look at one of the jobs, so I'll look at the host-based replication job. If I come to the virtual machines tab here, this shows me all of the VMs that are inside that job. So these are the ones that we've just been looking at that reporting for. So this is 2 web servers. Now, you might say, well, I said earlier that you might need to have something like a domain controller or something in there because it's going to need it for authentication. Well, I've got set up what we call continuous dependencies. That means that I have a different job here, which is a domain controller. This actually runs inside my DR site. So what happens is, I just log in. I'll give that a second to start up in the background. What happens is it takes a copy of my domain controller, copies it into the environment, and then heats it up inside that environment, so inside the isolated network. The idea is that if you have 3 or 4 jobs that all need that domain controller, you haven't got to restart it every time or re-snapshot it every time. It's always there. And actually, when you rerun the job, so maybe every 24 hours, it refreshes it. So it keeps it refreshed from the live environment. And as you can see, I've got here my DC1 continuous dependency. Now that's this job. So the VM name is DC1. When I've recreated it in the DR site, I've got it to change the name. Now that's only the name that VMware sees, because I'm actually running with a single vCenter. which again is something that a lot of our competition can't do. You have to have a vCenter at both sides. But that then gives you a couple of issues with things like names, because you can only have one machine of a name inside that environment. So in this case, I've renamed it the DC1 continuous dependency. So it's still DC1, the SID, etc. is all the same. And if I come back to my HBR job, you see I've called these, I've put SBR, software-based replication, as an extension on the end. Now, we set this by default. So you can set the extension to be whatever you want. So when you add a new machine in, it'll automatically put .replica or .backup, whatever you decide on there. So as I say, it's all running over at my second site. 10 and 11 have already been copied. So because I'm using the software or host-based replication, it creates a snapshot and copies it to the DR site. If you're doing array-based, it doesn't do that, because it will take the snapshot of the storage array at the secondary site and then register it, and then register the virtual machines, and then you'll see them at the DR site. So what I'm going to do here is Web Server 11, I'm just going to power this off. So I'm going to break it. So shut down, it's gone. Now, I've got a broken environment. I need to get that back up and running as quick as I can. So I come into here, go to the job that I know includes that VM, and I say failover. So I could do a run test, which is a manual run of a test, but I'm going to do failover. I'm then given a couple of options. I can do a failover failback, which is a migration from one site to another. So that will shut down your production, move it over, and bring it up at your DR site. But what I need to do here is a failover to my certified recovery point. Because the reason that may have gone down is because it's been corrupted. So I don't want any data coming up at the secondary site corrupted. I want to use one of those tests that I've already proved. So I choose my failover to CRP, and then what it does is it goes off and it goes, okay, so here's all my snapshots from when I've ran those tests. Now, by default, it's going to put it onto the test network, so that's my isolated network. So as you see on the network mapping, it says secondary site isolated network. But I want to get this working, so I want to put it on my production. So I choose that, and it actually switches it to what I've designated as my production network. And I'll show you these mappings in a second. It's really simple. But if I wanted to, I could click on this and change it. Now, I've said to you a couple of times, this is granular. Now, I've only lost Web Server 11, so that's all I want back. So I'm going to choose probably, well, not quite the oldest, but nearly the oldest snapshot here of just Web 11. I'm not worried about Web 10, because that was off anyway, and do OK. So I choose the 1 machine, 2 machines, 3 machines, whatever it is that I want to fail over out of that job, and choose OK. And that's it. That will now fail the machine over, reconfigure everything, and bring it back up for you. So if I stretch this a little bit, what you can see here is it's doing things like powering on the machine. And you can see it here now inside this default resource pool. So it's now powering on that box. So as it powers it on, once it gets up to VMware Tools, if I've asked it to reconfigure the network, it'll reset the IP address of the machine, and then it'll do things like run the application tests on it. So to have a little look at those, if I take my server and I right-click on it, I've got a whole series of options I can run. So I can set the boot order. So this is making sure that things come up in the right sequence. So your first one might be a domain controller, or it might be a database, and then your web server. This is all to get around the issue of, well, the web server boots really quick compared to the database, and then it can't find it. But you can choose whether you power the machines on or not. And because this is a software-based replication, so using ReliableDR's inbuilt replication, it's going to do a full copy the first time and then do differences. So the incrementals, whatever you want to think of them as. If you wanted to do a full copy, you could just click the on button again, and then it'll do a full overwrite. I can choose the amount of recovery points per VM. Or if it's array-based replication, it's the amount of snapshots for those that whole job. So there are some differences depending on your replication. Reconfigure IP. So I said it was really simple. All you do to reconfigure the IP address of a machine, give it a set of credentials that it can log into the live machine with. Say list VM networks. So whether it's a Windows box or a Linux box, doesn't matter. It'll go off, look at that, and come back with the networks. So 1, 2, 3 network cards, whatever it may be. And it'll say, okay, when you go into the secondary site, what IP address do you want? Or when you're going back to the primary site, do you want a different IP address? You configure whatever you need. So you change the default gateways. You can set it to a static IP address like this if it's DHCP at the moment. But you can choose whether it does it when you do a test or a failover or both. You just put a tick in the box. So it becomes very simple to actually change that. If you need to do a VSS snapshot, for whatever reason, you can get it to generate it here for you. You can do the application test. So again, to do the application tests, you give it a set of credentials that it can log in and run the tests with, because these tests are run inside the VM at the DR site. And these are those 3 tests you saw in the report. If I do add, and these are all out the box, by the way, so I haven't added any in or anything. This is how it'll come out when you install it. You've got right at the top, custom scripts. So if you've already invested your time and money and effort in creating a testing script for an application, you haven't got to throw it away. You can just add it in here. And then it becomes part of all the auditing for the RPO and the RTO. Now, this doesn't just need to be a testing script. This is any script that will run on the target operating system. So this could actually be to go off and reconfigure a firewall or a DNS server or whatever else it may be, whatever else you need to do. Change the configuration for an application. There's a whole host of different things. So I talked about the SQL one. So when you look at the SQL service, you can just type in whichever process name it is in there. But also do the check query. So it'll log into the SQL database and then look at the expected output. Now all these tests have a couple of states. There's obviously, okay, it worked. By default, if a test fails, it'll generate a warning. So everything will just carry on, but it'll just go, this failed, and here's the reason why. But you have a box on all of these tests to say this is a critical test. So on my Active Directory server that I showed before, I checked the AD services, I checked DHCP and a few other things. And they're all marked as critical tests. So if one of those fails, it alerts me and it just doesn't bother going any further because that's effectively broke. It isn't going to work. So it's about saving you time, but then letting you know instantly that there's a major issue. But I can also add on the bottom Windows services or processes. So if you've written your own service or process, you can just add it in here. Again, very, very easy and simple to do. And there's similar things for the scripts and the processes for Linux boxes. It'll just pick up what the OS is and present you the relevant tests. I can change the DR name, which we've talked about before, but I can also do offline seeding. So if I'm a cloud service provider or I've got 2 sites and I've got a slow link between them, we can index everything. Then you can drop the contents of those virtual machines, say, off to an external hard drive, copy it to your DR site, upload it, and then we can relink them and then just take the differences over the network. So if you haven't got to copy that terabytes worth of data or whatever it is across. And then obviously you've got licensing. Now, one of the questions we had before was how is it licensed? And as I said, it's licensed per VM that you want to protect. So to do this job, of course, it's two licenses. If one of these machines appears in another job, it's not an additional license because it's already classed as being protected. So if you have a domain controller in, say, 6 jobs, and it's the same domain controller, then it's only one license. But we have 2 license types right at the moment, and that's one called Foundation and one called Enterprise. Now, the Foundation is the same as SRM, so it doesn't give you the application tests. The Enterprise does. Now, at the end of the month, we're releasing a new version, 3.2, which will have some licensing changes along with other things. What the changes will be is we're actually renaming Foundation to Professional. It actually brings it in line with the rest of the PHD product set. And also, you still have the Enterprise, but we're going to have a storage option. So what we're going to be doing is splitting out the storage adapter, because we had a lot of people that said, well, I'm not going to use the storage adapter, so I don't really want to pay for it. So we're changing all the prices to reflect that as well. So if you only want to use the array-based replication, say for 6 VMs, and the host-based for 20, you only have to buy the storage module for those 6. So it just makes it more cost-effective. Just to go back to this job, as you can see now, it's all completed. It's actually up and running at the DR site. So if we have a look back in vCenter, here it is. It's over here, up and running. So what you could do then is a couple of things. If you come back into Failover, you're then presented with a slightly different set of options. And the first one is Failover Commit. And this is usually what you will do if you're going to be running on this site for a little while, even if it's only a few hours. But if you've got data that you're going to want to keep, you need to do the commit. What the commit does is it tells ReliableDR that, okay, this is now going to be the master server. So what it will do is it will reverse the job to replicate back out to your production site. So when you run a test, it'll actually copy the data the other way. So you're starting to get that protection up and working again. And then you can do that failover. Or you can failover to the CRP. So you can do the migration very, very easily, which means you've got 0 data loss at that point. Now, the other option is to Failover Unmount. And all that does is it goes, okay, we're not bothered. I've got no data to keep. I'm just going to shut the machines down. So it cleans it all up. You then turn the machines back on at the production site. So that's actually what I'm going to do in this demonstration environment. So I just hit Failover Unmount, and it'll just kick that job off for me very, very easily and quickly. So while that's running, if I just come back to my auditing here, as you can see, I've got that failover right at the top of the auditing for me. Now, the one thing I promised you that we'd have a quick look at is the mappings, because this is one that can cause a lot of people headaches when they're looking at DR and testing, but this is a completely automated way of doing it, so just to make your life easier and simpler. So all you do is you create a mapping, and it's very simple. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll just do add. So I'm adding a new mapping in just to show you how easy it is. And the majority of things are very similar to this in the product. So because I have a single vCenter, it's that my source and my target are the same. But I just choose my source vCenter, my target vCenter. Choose next. And then what it does is it goes up and it queries them. And all you do is you choose your networks. It's that simple. So you can say as a default for this primary site data center, when I'm failing over, so to my test network, I'm going to choose the ReliableDR isolated network and that one as my production. So when I fail over, And that's it. If I want to get granular, I can say, okay, on my isolated, so when I choose the isolated one, maybe it's different networks. So it will override the default. And you can build as many of these up as you like. So you'll choose the failover, and then of course you'll choose the fail back because we need to have configuration back the other way. And then you give it a name. And that's all I've done with these up at the top. So I have my failover, I have my fail back, but then I can also add in my folders, so my VMware folders. So if you're a cloud service provider or you like to manage where your virtual machines are stored, so put them in subfolders, these sorts of things, we can map to all of that for you. But also using resource pools. So if you remember, when I actually failed over that web server, it's inside the resource pool, whereas these others aren't. Because only for that mapping have I got the resource pool set. So you see, I have a HBR mapping, and my failover resource pool is that one. But on my array-based replication, I don't have any set. So that's how granular you can be. And of course, this could be from 2 or 3 production sites to 1 DR, or 1 production to 2 or 3 DR sites, or active to active. It doesn't make any difference. It just depends how complicated you want to make everything. So very quickly, really, just one last thing, just before I go back to questions. We talked about the multi-tenancy very, very quickly. So just as an example here, I've got data center, which is all this configuration at the top end. And then I've got some customers underneath. So I've got Yorkshire Fire, Bridgend College, PHD Virtual, just as some examples. And then maybe some departments under that. But if I choose Yorkshire Fire and do manage, it actually logs me into their environment. So as you can see, all the configurations are now changed. But this allows me to do things like rebranding. So actually, when they log in, they'll go to a slightly different website and they'll get their own logon screen. And of course, you can do that for the main data center as well. But that logo will also appear on the reports instead of the PHD Virtual logo. And as I said, they've got all their own configuration, their own LDAP configurations, their own replica extensions. So for the virtual machines, it's all individual configuration. The role-based administration is really simple. Some people have a lot of issues with products that have role-based administration. Ours is just a very simple set of tick boxes. Actually, I've just chosen a system role, so I can't change anything. But if I do add, I can just very, very easily say, yeah, I want to allow whoever's going to have this role to be able to run and delete, but not update or create on the replication specification. So you just put tick boxes in them. It's very easy to do. And we've got a certain amount there of preset roles. So, as I said, very, very quickly, that's ReliableDR. Just to show you, and I'll leave it on this screen, this is a slightly more complicated job, but it'll just give you an idea of different sort of boot orders, different things. We have different amounts of jobs, different tests, different configurations for each individual one. So, any questions, Doug? Have we had any comments come in? Does anybody want me to go over anything else?
Yeah. Yep. I'm not muted. I had to check there. Yes, we do have a few more questions, but we are 9 minutes over, so we do want to respect everybody's time. If you need to jump off, please feel free. But we do have a few more questions, and Ian could, go on. So let's keep this show running. So let me dive into the first question. Is there a vCloud Director integration for DR as a service?
Yes, there is. So if I come to administration here and come into the vCloud Director, there's about 3 or 4 different places But yes, we do integrate with vCloud Director as a DR site. So you can come from a customer having a normal sort of vCenter site and push it into vCloud Director. So yes, there's a couple of extra pieces in configuration that you need to do, but it is supported.
Perfect. Next question is, Citrix needs better DR. It was more of a statement. We had issues with people logging in, but if they would have had this, they would have failed over. We would all be happy. But I like that comment somebody made. Next one, we have two EqualLogic SANs. Would the SAN replication be preferred to the reliable DR replication across the WAN?
With the Dell EqualLogics, it has an issue in that it will do full replicas each time. It's one of the few array-based replications that will do that. A lot of them work on individual segments, but it's going to depend. If you've got a lot of information that you want to replicate across, usually the array-based replication is the better way. But what you have to remember is when we start taking snapshots or replicas of the data stores, different software, different arrays deal with this in different ways. So it's worth talking to us about the specific array. But with the Dells, it takes a copy of the data store. So if you say got 3 data stores and your VMs are spread across all 3 data stores, we're going to snapshot all of those to make sure we get them. So sometimes it is better to do the software-based replication if you've only got a few virtual machines. And of course, it depends on rate of change, bandwidth. But what you may find as well with array-based replication, you might only be replicating once a day, say at night, just before you do a backup, where you actually think, well, for my critical systems, maybe I want to test twice a day. Well, if you're doing it with array-based replication, you're using the same data both times, so actually you're still only doing one test. But with the host-based replication, it will update the end target VM. So, to be honest, it's a very difficult one to answer because of the differences. But with the Dell EqualLogic, you may well be better going down the host-based replication route. The best thing to do is get in touch with the PHD sales rep that looks after you, or just send an email to sales@PHD Virtual or log on to our website, and we can set up a call and talk through it in a bit greater depth. It's probably the easiest way. Then we can get more understanding of how you've got your environment configured. And this goes for anybody with any of your environments. And then we can suggest what might be the best way to do it.
Excellent, excellent. Next question. Will there be benefits for using WAN accelerators?
Yes. Yeah, we fully support WAN accelerators. But yes, there will be, because what that will do is with ReliableDR host-based replication, we just take a copy of the virtual machine and then obviously all the data. With WAN accelerators, they'll compress that, they'll strip out the spare space and actually transmit the information across a lot quicker. So yes, we will work with that. And actually, we copy over one port. We copy over port 902 as well. So you can actually control the bandwidth, depending obviously on what you've got. You can compress that, do whatever you need to on that port. But the other thing that you can do, obviously, you've got the replication on that port, so you can compress it and transmit it across.
Perfect. Next question. Is there this is an interesting question. Is there a self-service portal for customers where they can start a failover or failback or fallback?
Basically, this environment, so this web page, you can publish that out to the customer. So using the roles on the administration, you could give them. So do you remember when I just went down here, we looked at the roles, you might add a role, and then under the replication specifications, give them the ability to effectively run it That will allow them to run a test or run the failovers. You could then remove all of the other things like the licenses, notifications, and everything else out of there. So that's the only thing they can do. Just look at the jobs, run them, fail them over, etc. As I say, this is just a web page. So as long as they can access this web page, they can log in. So of course you could have that. You could have it fronted in the DMZ if you wanted.
Perfect. Next question is, how do you, so PHD has other products, and how does this solution interact with the other technologies? And I'm paraphrasing.
Right, okay. We're actually in beta at the moment of our next version, which is 3.2. So this product with a little bit added on. And the little bit that we've added on is the ability to use PHD's virtual backup appliance. So they have their virtual backup that I talked about in the slides at the beginning. Now, this is an appliance that you could put at the production site, and it will do your backups. So you could back up 60, 70, 80 VMs if you want. Then you get full deduplication, encryption, these sorts of things on those backups. Now, you can also use that to replicate the VMs to the DR site. So you said about WAN accelerators. So the reason I sort of ummed and ahed was I thought, oh, do I mention this or not? But with the virtual backup appliance, if you have one at production, one at the DR site, you can back up at production and then replicate it all to the DR site, or even just certain virtual machines. And of course, they come across in a compressed and deduplicated format. So that then compresses the amount of data down very dramatically that is being transmitted across. And then ReliableDR will be able to pick up on those backups. So at about the end of the month, we're due to release 3.2. That gives you the ability to use ReliableDR completely agentless backup and replication. You can use the storage, so everything we've been talking about, or you can use the backup appliance. Now, there is a separate charge because it is a full backup appliance, but we're releasing a suite as well. So if you want both products together, there's obviously an incentive to buy both. So there'll be a reduced cost as opposed to buying them individually. But as I say, that just gives you another option to do with the replication. And that just simply is going to plug straight in. Where we do add job here and you've got two options, you're going to have the extra option in there. So it's just going to be another window for you to choose from. And it's a very similar job sequence to run through. But again, it gives you failover, failback, etc., and all your application testing.
Perfect, perfect. And I have to say, I love how you say beta. So Steve Jobs always says, you know, I never Johnny Ives. I love how he says aluminium, and I always laugh at that. But I always love how British guys say beta. So I had to bring that up. So that's all the questions we have at the moment. If there's any other questions out there, we're probably going to end this thing soon. Please feel free to use the questions piece. As you can tell, Ian is he's on it, so he knows his stuff and then some. So anything and everything, let's throw at him, and if not, we'll probably get in this thing soon. Ian, do you have more stuff to show, or where are we at?
To be honest, I could go on for another good hour or so showing things, but a lot of it is the more, I wouldn't say minor, but it's the more intricacies of the sort of details of the notifications, different configurations, schedules, all these sorts of things. All the key stuff really we've gone through, which is the testing, the failover, the failback options, so the ability to test everything, and also to do migrations without losing any data as well, different replication types.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and call this an episode. I don't see any other questions, so I'll give you the last word, and we'll call this a show.
Okay, I'd just like to say thank you to everybody. I mean, if you've got any more additional questions, please let us know. If not, you can always give us a ring, go onto our website. You can actually download a trial edition of ReliableDR and the PHD backups direct from the PHD Virtual website. Just go on there, download them, and they come with all the instructions. Very, very easy to install on both products. You've got full SE support, so if you are having any issues, drop us an email, give us a ring, and we'll gladly assist you in trialing it and getting it all installed and configured. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Ian. I guess I told you I'd give you the last word, but I'll take the last word. So thanks, everyone, for attending this DABCC Live webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. I apologize to the guys that are probably listening to this in recorded version because they were unable to log in due to go to webinar issues. So real bummer there. If you guys do have questions, like Ian said, please email PHD, or you can always email me, and I'll get the answers to them. Although answers to you, the questions to them. Although it's always best just to talk directly to the source. And definitely stay tuned to DABCC.com, DABCC Radio, DABCC TV, all the things we do for tons of information about PHD. And then, of course, everything that's going on with the virtualization and cloud world. So on that note, guys, thank you so much for attending. I thoroughly enjoy these things. I always tell people, the best part about these is I'm an attendee also, and I get to learn too. And I tell you, that's just what a privilege it is to sit through all these things with all these smart guys. So on that note, thanks so much for everyone for listening to this episode of DABCC Live. And until next time, have a good day, everybody.